Elara hadn't expected much when she arrived at Marrow House. The ad described it as affordable and quiet, but the reality was a rotting structure where wallpaper peeled like dead skin. Still, she needed somewhere to disappear. Her fingers trembled as she signed the lease. The landlord, Mrs. Greaves, never looked her in the eye. Her room was at the far end of the hall, behind a crooked door with a brass knob that felt cold no matter the temperature. It was quiet during the day, save for the occasional creak of wood or distant cough. But the nights were different. That first night, Elara heard something, faint humming, like a lullaby, coming from inside the walls. She pressed her ear against the floral wallpaper. The melody was soft, almost gentle, but what unsettled her was that it paused whenever she listened closely, as if the thing humming it knew she was there. She tried to ignore it, pulling the thin blanket over her head, but sleep never came. At 3:33 a.m., the humming turned into soft scratching, like fingernails dragging through plaster. She told herself it was mice, or the house settling, but deep down she knew better. It was deliberate, rhythmic, intelligent. By morning, a message was etched into her mirror's condensation. "Don't hum back." Elara asked Mrs. Greaves about the humming, trying to sound casual. The old woman's smile thinned. "Some people say this house listens. Best not to listen back," she replied, then walked off without another word. Elara wasn't sure if it was a joke or a warning. That night, she heard footsteps pacing in the room above hers. When she went upstairs the next morning, she found the door padlocked and coated in dust. Mrs. Greaves claimed no one had lived there for years. But Elara swore she heard a voice up there, soft, pleading, humming the same lullaby. Determined to prove it wasn't just her unraveling mind, Elara left her phone recording overnight. The next morning, she played it back and nearly dropped the device. At exactly 3:33 a.m., there was a whisper. It sounded like her voice, but she hadn't spoken. "Elara, don't forget me," it said. She ran her hand along the wall where the whisper had come from and felt a faint pulse, like a heartbeat trapped in the drywall. Her breath caught. Was the house alive? Or was something living inside it? She didn't sleep the following night, but the house still whispered her name. Elara borrowed a knife from the communal kitchen. She waited until midnight, then began peeling away a section of wallpaper where the humming was loudest. Beneath it, she found an old wooden panel nailed to the wall with rusted, bent nails. The wood was cracked and warped, as if it had absorbed years of moisture, and something else. She pried it open and found a narrow crawl space behind her wall. It smelled like mildew, metal, and something rotten. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, twitching shadows inside. She reached in with the phone's camera and took several pictures. Most were dark blurs, but one made her blood run cold. A face, pale, with wide, empty eyes and a stitched mouth, was pressed against the inside. It was smiling. Terrified, she backed away and sealed the panel. The humming returned immediately. It sounded closer now, like it had moved just beneath her bed. She ran, but the floorboards echoed with 2 sets of footsteps, though she was alone. When she turned out the lights, the humming stopped. Then came the whisper, "You saw me. Now I can come through." Elara began researching Marrow House. What she found made her sick. Over the past 5 decades, there were at least 11 disappearances tied to the property. All young tenants. All last seen in the hallways at night. Old tenant logs had gaps, pages torn out, or names scribbled over. But on one brittle, stained document, Elara found a name she recognized, Lara Devons. It was her mother's name. Her hands shook. Her mother had never spoken of her past, only that she ran from something as a teen. Elara confronted Mrs. Greaves. The old woman paled. "I didn't know she was your mother. She escaped, you know. Barely. But not before it marked her. It always marks them." Mrs. Greaves whispered a name then, but it wasn't human. It sounded like a broken music box gasping its final note. Elara tore up the floorboards in her closet that night. Beneath the wood was a pile of dust-covered objects, photographs, journals, even a cracked pair of glasses. On one journal, written in what looked like blood, was the word, "Stay silent." But inside, the final page read something else. "The walls feed on sound. Don't speak. Don't hum. Don't scream." Elara started to test the theory. She sat perfectly still at 3:33 a.m., holding her breath. That night, the humming grew louder, more desperate, like a choir of voices trapped in a nightmare. But when she didn't respond, it faded. The next day, she left a voice recorder in the hallway. It picked up dozens of whispers saying her name in different tones, some childlike, some in deep gurgles. They all said the same sentence, "Come into the walls." One whisper didn't match the others. It was her mother's voice. "You can still leave, Elara, but it will follow, unless you feed it." The voice ended with a scream, cut off, gurgling, then silence. Elara realized then, those who vanished didn't just disappear. They were taken, but part of them remained, bound to the walls like flies in amber, eternally humming lullabies to lure others inside. The next night, she heard a knock from inside the crawl space. 3 slow knocks, then a 4th, a new pattern, an invitation. Elara stared at the crawl space. Her breath fogged in the air, though the room wasn't cold. The 4th knock echoed in her bones, like something inside her responded to it. She didn't dare move closer. Instead, she placed her hand against the wall. It was warm, warmer than any wall should be. She leaned in, listening. There was no humming this time, just breathing, heavy, labored, coming from both sides of the wall, as if the house had lungs and she was inside its rib cage. Suddenly, from inside the crawl space, came a voice she hadn't heard before. A young boy. "He let it in. I didn't mean to. I only wanted to hum one song." Then silence. Then a scream, short, wet, and full of regret. Elara backed away, her hand covering her mouth. The wall bulged slightly, as though something was pressing against it, stretching the plaster like skin. The pressure receded with a creak. She knew then that silence wasn't just protection. It was defiance. The house hated silence. It needed sound to survive. And more than that, it needed someone to listen. Curious to find someone, anyone who had survived long enough to speak, Elara knocked on room 5. A girl with matted black hair and deep purple bags under her eyes opened the door a crack. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. The girl's name was Mina. She had lived in Marrow House for 4 years, far longer than anyone else. "I follow the rules," she said. "No humming, no names, no mirrors." Her room was covered in strange sigils and salt lines, with fabric stapled over the vents and walls. Mina explained that the entity between the walls was called the listener. It was ancient, but its hunger grew stronger every decade. It mimics voices, repeats memories. It doesn't kill outright. It absorbs, makes you part of its song. Elara asked why Mina hadn't left. "Because I did leave, once. It followed me. My brother hummed in his sleep. He didn't wake up. her voice cracked. I came back to keep others safe, or to die trying. Before Elara left the room, Mina gave her something, a small cassette tape labeled "Bury This If I'm Gone." Elara played the tape only once, using an old Walkman she found in a thrift shop. The recording was low and static-filled, but Mina's voice was clear. If you're hearing this, I'm gone. The listener took me. Mina's recorded message was full of instructions. How to hide your voice, how to seal your thoughts, how to lure the thing back to sleep. But there's a cost, she said. You can't get rid of it. You can only give it someone else. The final words chilled Elara. The house chooses one protector. If you're hearing this, it's you now. At that exact moment, every light in the house flickered. Elara paused the tape, and the silence screamed. Not audibly, but inside her skull, like pressure building in her brain. From the hallway came the sound of a body being dragged, slowly, bumping along the wooden floorboards. She looked out, but saw nothing. Except the door to room 5 was open now. Inside, only the cassette player remained. Mina was gone, just like the others. Elara couldn't leave. Not now. She had to know why the house wanted her. In the basement, behind stacks of moldy books and rusted pipes, she found an old box full of torn Polaroids and cracked voice recorders. One photo made her stop breathing. It was her mother, young, terrified, standing in front of Marrow House. Behind her, etched faintly into the wood siding, was the word, sacrifice. One of the recorders still worked. She played it. A man's voice, shaking, paranoid, spoke. It needs a voice. Always a voice. My wife was first, then our daughter. It's still hungry. The man sobbed. I'm sorry, Elara. I'm so sorry. Her father, a man she had never known. He had once lived here too. Suddenly the humming returned. But this time it was her own voice singing, louder than ever, from inside the walls. That night the hum didn't stop. It rose into a low chant, then turned into cries for help, her voice, Mina's, her mother's, all overlapping in a broken choir. Elara crouched on the floor, covering her ears. But then she noticed a soft creak beneath her. The floorboards shifted. From between two warped planks, a dark, wet slit opened, like a mouth. A voice gurgled from inside. Feed me silence, or feed me blood. Elara screamed. The mouth screamed back, not in sound but in memory. Her childhood screams, her mother's lullabies, the last words of every vanished tenant, all echoed at once. It was no longer mimicking. It was becoming her. She ran to the hallway, but every door was gone. The walls had shifted, the house reconfiguring itself. The windows were bricked up from the inside. She was inside something alive, and it had noticed her. A final voice rang in her ears. You're not the first, Elara, and you won't be the last. Elara woke on the floor, uncertain how long she'd been unconscious. The floorboards were still wet with her sweat, or something else. All her belongings had vanished. Even her name was gone from the lease in the hallway. In its place, vacancy. She ran to the bathroom and stared at her reflection. Her face was paler, thinner. Her eyes looked wrong, not fully her own. Whispering rose from behind the mirror, and in the fog on the glass, letters formed. Who are you now? Desperate, Elara carved her name into her arm, just to remember it was hers. The pain grounded her, but the blood seeped through the floorboards. The walls moaned in response, hungry for identity. She screamed into the walls, "What do you want from me?" The house whispered in many voices, to be remembered, to be repeated, to be sung. The listener didn't just want to feed. It wanted to be a story. That night, Her dreams were not her own. She relived deaths she never experienced. She remembered names that weren't hers. The house was making her forget, one memory at a time. Elara found a candle in the drawer of the nightstand. Strange, bone white, with carvings around its base. A note attached read, "Light only when the house tries to become you." At 3:33 a.m., the lights cut out completely. The humming rose to a shriek, and the walls began to bleed a thin black fluid. Desperate, Elara lit the candle. Instantly the air shifted. The sound muted. A voice from the flame whispered, "You're not alone." The candle showed her things, faces trapped between the walls. Some she recognized, Mina, her mother, others she'd seen in photos. They reached for her, but the flame kept them at bay. "You can still end this," the candle said, "but you must choose who stays in your place." She couldn't breathe. The house demanded a replacement. Every protector must feed it someone, or be consumed themselves. It wasn't just haunted, it was a ritual, a cycle. The flame flickered, revealing a face behind her shoulder. It wore her skin, her eyes, her smile. It said, "If you won't give me someone, I'll take you." Elara now heard the whispers even during the day. Her name echoed from inside the fridge, behind books, under the floor. People in town stared at her longer, as if her face had started to look familiar, too familiar. She visited the town library and found an article from decades ago. A fire had gutted part of Marrow House in 1961. 4 tenants died inside. None were recovered. The article ended with a strange line. The house was built on stories, and the stories demand their end. Back in her room, the walls breathed visibly. The wallpaper puffed in and out like lungs. Elara tried to record it, but the footage turned to static, and then her face appeared in the video, screaming in silence. In desperation, she wrote everything she knew into a journal. "If someone finds this, please don't listen, don't hum, burn this place, burn the silence out of it." But even her pen scratched words she hadn't written. One phrase repeated in every margin: "The hush between walls is louder than death." There was one place Elara hadn't gone: the second basement. Mrs. Greaves had always said it was just storage. But that night, she found the key beneath her pillow. Old, warm to the touch, and wrapped in human hair. The basement stairs creaked downward endlessly. At the bottom, the air grew colder, and the walls narrowed like a throat. There were no lights, only the candle, still faintly burning. At the bottom, she found a door. It was breathing. With every inhale, dust flew up in spirals, carved into the wood. "Say your name to enter." She didn't speak. She just pressed her hand to the door, and it opened. Inside was a single chair. In it sat a man with no mouth, bleeding from the eyes, writing frantically in a language she couldn't understand. Around him, walls made of people, flesh and bone, pressed into plaster, silently screaming. The man turned to her and mouthed one word: "Replace." Elara ran back up the stairs, but the house had changed. No windows, no sky, only hallways that looped endlessly. Every wall whispered options. One scream, one life, yours or another's. The listener had grown impatient. Then a knock. The front door. A delivery boy, no older than 17, stepped inside. Lost, confused. The house went still, waiting. Elara felt it. This was her way out. Feed the house, and it would let her leave. Let the boy vanish into the walls, become another hum in the chorus. Just one life. A stranger. The door opened behind her, revealing moonlight. The boy looked at her, nervous. Hey, is this Marrow House? Elara didn't speak. The candle in her hand flickered. The house held its breath, waiting for her decision. And then she blew out the candle. The moment Elara blew out the candle, the house groaned like a sinking ship. The flame died, and with it, the only barrier between her and the listener. Shadows swarmed from the corners, stretching longer than physics allowed. The boy dropped his phone. "What the hell is this place?" he whispered. That whisper was enough. The walls shuddered, and the floorboards opened like jaws. Elara grabbed his hand and pulled him towards the kitchen. "Don't speak again," she hissed. But the boy, confused and terrified, muttered, "Why?" The listener heard. A piercing note screamed from every corner of the house, like an organ pipe breaking through bone. The boy clutched his ears and collapsed, blood dripping from his nose. The walls began to breathe louder. It had chosen. Elara dragged the boy to Mina's old room, slamming the door shut. Salt still lined the floor. For now, they were safe. But only until the salt thinned, or the house grew stronger. Elara awoke with a stinging sensation across her back. In the mirror, carved into her skin by unseen hands during the night, were the words, "You were chosen." The boy, whose name was Jacob, sat in the corner, rocking back and forth. "I heard my mother in the walls," he whispered. "She's been dead for 5 years, but I swear, she sang to me last night." Elara realized something horrifying. The house didn't just consume people, it memorized them. Every scream, every whisper, every lullaby. It archived souls like songs in a jukebox, forever playable, forever trapped. That day, the walls didn't hum. They spoke, in unison. Hundreds of voices layered into one, chanting her name. Elara, Elara, Elara. It was her initiation. She was becoming part of it. Then a new word formed in the fogged mirror. Sacrifice or sanctuary. In desperation, Elara returned to the basement. The door at the bottom stood open now. No ritual, no voice required. Inside, the man with no mouth was gone. Only the chair remained, and a spiral carved into the floor. She stood in the center of the spiral, and suddenly, memory returned. Not hers, but the house's. She saw every death, every choice, every protector who chose survival over salvation. Mina, her mother, her father. All had fed the house someone, and in the final vision, she saw herself. Not now, but a different version. A child, crying on the stairs as her mother hummed a lullaby. The moment it all began. Elara had always belonged to the house. She collapsed to her knees. It wasn't possession, it was inheritance. She wasn't the next victim. She was the next vessel. Behind her the voice spoke again. "You are the house now. Choose wisely." Elara returned upstairs to find Jacob gone. The salt line broken, the window open, and the humming, now sharp and twisted, blaring from every surface. The listener had him. She ran to room 5 and found the cassette Mina had given her long ago. The label had changed. Now it read, "Play me to end it." She pressed play. A hum emerged, but this time it fractured the walls. The frequencies warped the structure of the house. Screams erupted from inside the pipes. The walls bled thick, black sap. Every voice cried out, in pain and rage. Mina's voice came through the static. One note sung backward, one name unspoken. Break the silence and break the spell. Elara stood in the center of the hallway and screamed, not in fear, but in defiance. The hum cracked. The walls tore open, and from within the listener crawled forth, a mass of mouths, ears, and echoing agony. She shouted her name one final time. I am Elara, and I do not belong to you.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Rob's Story channel so that the admin is enthusiastic about creating content.